Welcome to the Seahawkers podcast with your hosts, Adam Emmert.
That's a dude who held Peyton Manning's clipboard for a year or two and got paid. Congratulations, man.
And Brandan Schultz.
Why don't we just play all of the rushing highlights from this entire season and play that right now?
Go Hawks!
This is episode 187 of the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandan Schultz of the Military Seahawkers. Joining me, my good buddy, Montana Seahawker, Adam Emmert.
Last week, Brandon, we started out the podcast with you unceremoniously firing me. I refuse your firing, and I showed up again this week. Let's see if Darrell Bevel does the same next week and just shows up to his office to take over offensive coordinator duties once again, because he was fired, Brandon. Fired overnight.
Fired. Not only Darrell Bevel, but Tom Cable also let go by the Seahawks. And we're going to focus on Darrell Bevel in this week's show. But word came out late Tuesday and into Wednesday about Bevel. Curtis Crabtree initially broke the news on Twitter, and it was made official on Wednesday from a statement by Pete Carroll. It says, "We are challenged by change, but excited to attack the future with great purpose. I want to thank both Tom and Darrell for their role in helping take this program to a championship level. I will always be grateful for the opportunity to coach and compete alongside these great men." I expect that Darrell Bevel being let go was something that was on his mind when he was giving his end of season press conference, and he usually does drop several clues in his end of season press conferences to where the team is going forward. So we're going to talk about that. And, you know, to balance out some of the negativity, I think we need to talk about some of the areas for optimism in 2018. Now, this could shake things up a little bit.
You're premature with this for me. Like, yeah. I'm still not there yet, but I'm going to give it a go with you on this this episode. I know you were gung-ho to get back to some positive stuff, but I'm not done with the postmortem on this season, man. Like, it's still just over. Like, it's just been over. I'm not ready yet, man, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try for your sake. I'm ready.
Well, I will say that this plan was all put down before Darrell Bevel was fired. So this show could take a very different turn than from what I had planned, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's what you get for planning, dude. I don't even know why you tried that crap.
I thought maybe we were safe because it's the offseason, but apparently they're ready to make changes now, and it makes sense.
You know better, dude. Come on.
I know. Well, we'll talk about that, and then you also called out Windows Phone users last week, and we got at least one response, so...
They were able to respond on their Windows Phone? Like, did they like type it out on the Windows Phone and then send it by carrier pigeon to somebody? Is that how that works with the Windows Phone, since they're so archaic?
You know, it's probably more advanced than the phone that you carry, so I would maybe back off that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not claiming mine's the height of technology, that's for sure.
All right, well, before we get into the Bevel news, let's start off by congratulating the Rams on not embarrassing themselves as badly as the last time they had a playoff game in the Coliseum. That was a 28-0 loss in the NFC Championship game to the Cowboys back in the playoffs for the 1978 season. So congratulations to the Rams for scoring points against the Falcons.
Sure. I couldn't care less about which one of those teams won. Can't stand either of them. So I guess congrats, Falcons. You still stink. And, you know, the Rams, you are who we thought you were. So, neat.
How can your Falcons hate be as strong as your sports hate for the Rams?
Okay, so Russell Wilson has been our quarterback for 6 years now, correct?
Yeah.
3 of our seasons have been ended by the Atlanta Falcons. And you wonder how my sports hate could be so high for that franchise. 3 times in the last 6 years. More than 50% of our seasons that don't end in a Super Bowl title since Russell Wilson has been quarterback, ended by the Atlanta Falcons. And you wonder.
Moving on. Let's talk about the big news. Darrell Bevel let go as the Seahawks offensive coordinator, hired on after Pete Carroll let go of Jeremy Bates after one season back in that 2010 season. So Bevel been coaching since 2011, and he's had some up and down years with the team. Hawk Blogger on Twitter posted the Seahawks DVOA, kind of a measurement of how well an offense is doing in comparison to other teams. I know You would probably like this statistic better, Adam, because it takes yards out of the equation, because the last couple of years, Seahawks offense have put up some of the most prolific yards, or prolific numbers in terms of yards the last couple of years. However, their best seasons as an offense, definitely 2015, and that was part of a Marshawn Lynch season, part of a Thomas Rawls season where we're all excited about. They had a great second half. And then, of course, 2012, 2014 and 2013, all in the top 7. When they didn't have Marshawn Lynch, however, 22nd ranked, 16th ranked in 2016, and 14th ranked this year in terms of DVOA. So without Marshawn, definitely a different offense. And you heard Pete Carroll in the press conference talking about wanting to make changes, and this looks like the first.
It was time for a new voice on offense. I think we've all kind of come to grips with that, because one thing that you did point out there, Brandon, is that they were pretty high up there as an offense, whether you want to take it by yards or DVOA or whatever, for a couple of years there, where the offense really was clicking very well, especially in the running game. And I think what's been on my mind concerning Darrell Bevell is, yes, we've had some good years with him in the past, but the trend is getting worse. And so with the last 2 years having it be a backslide again and again, I think that's a major problem. And when you start looking at that, then it is, I think, time for a new voice and time to move on from Bevel. But honestly, a lot of the backslide and a lot of the regression of the offense in terms of the running game specifically, he didn't choose the offensive lineman. And that's tough, man. That's a tough thing for him to have to overcome. But fact of the matter is that couldn't get running the ball. That annoyed Pete more than anything in the world. And I think Bevel, to try to save his own skin, tried to go to the short passing game and really try to connect with that. And that worked for a short period of time. But when Pete said we had to go back to the running game and we couldn't get it going, I think that was the death nail for Darrell Bevell.
I like what you said about the need for potentially a different voice. And I think one of the things that we've been hearing about Darrell Bevell might not have been not so much the issue with the play calling, but that he might not have had that voice to coach Russell Wilson in the way Pete Carroll feels that he needs to be coached at this point of his career. I wonder how this is going to impact Russell Wilson. Without knowing who's coming in, can we expect more of a learning year from Wilson as he gets used to something completely new for the first time as an NFL quarterback?
If you look at Russell Wilson, what are some of his strengths? Number one, first and foremost, is intelligence. You talk about him coming into rookie training camp, his rookie year, coming from a college background that he started out at NC State with a spread offense, went to Wisconsin, learned a more traditional pro-style offense, under center a lot, picked that up in a year, comes into his rookie training camp with the Seahawks, picks up almost the entire playbook by the time rookie training camp was over, impressed the coaches so much that he beats out the $15-20 million man and Matt Flynn. As far as learning a new playbook, that concerns me the least with Russell Wilson. This isn't a guy like, say, Alex Smith was the first 5-6 years of his career, where he had a new offensive coordinator each and every year. Not that Alex Smith is a dumb guy, but he never had a chance to establish himself and establish a rhythm as to how he plays. Where Russell Wilson has had that now for basically 6 years with Darrell Bevell. And now a new voice comes in. He's already established, though, and he knows how to play the game. He's not having to try to pick up a new coach's scheme and be like, oh, this must be the way I'm supposed to play. He already knows how he's supposed to play. It's just a matter of changing the scheme around a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a huge problem.
One thing that we've seen on defense, we've seen a lot of changes in the defensive coordinator position over the years because those guys move into head coaching positions. And one of the things that we've talked about, it's not really any of those guys' defense. It's Pete Carroll's defense. Now, he may do a better job of picking guys who have the potential to be head coaches on the defensive side of the ball. But I also wonder on the offensive side of the ball if we are going to see, you talked about innovation in terms of offense and when wanting to see that. That was one of the things you mentioned last week. Are we going to see a type of guy brought in who has that kind of flexibility, or does Pete Carroll have in mind the type of offense that he wants run, and he's going to pick the guy that will implement his style of offense that he really likes.
So I don't know why you can't have both, honestly, because basically Pete Carroll's style of offense is to run the football, to close a circle of toughness, to complement the defense, and then have large chunk plays in the offense when it comes to the passing game. There's a million ways you can do that, right? There's a lot of freedom and flexibility and room for innovation within that framework. Run the crap out of the football and then gash them with big chunk plays downfield in the passing game. So, yeah, I don't understand why you can't have both. I think you absolutely can. So then the next step is to look around the league and try to figure out, okay, out of the offenses you see being run around the league, which offense would you like to mimic the most? What kind of fits Pete Carroll's mantra and the way that he wants to play? And are there guys available from those teams?
Have you done that yet? Have you looked around and had a chance to maybe think, yeah, that might be a guy I'd be interested in the Seahawks bringing in to take a look at?
So I thought about this a little bit, and I'm no football savant, but when I look around the league, there's one team that is hyper committed to the run game and really sets everything up for the quarterback to run around a little bit and try to get a few big chunk plays in the passing game. And that's the Tennessee Titans. If you're going to hire somebody away from another coaching staff, it's going to have to be a move up. It can't be a lateral move. It can't be, all right, we're going to go get their offensive coordinator because they're most likely under contract. Now, I don't know the contract status of any of these dudes on the Titans.
Well, for example, someone suggested, actually it was Dave Bloomquist suggested Matt LaFleur from the Rams. You're not getting Matt LaFleur because he's under contract with the Rams. He just signed last year. I doubt he signed a one-year deal. You're not going to be able to get him away from the Rams.
So the guy that I settled on when I was looking at this, because I'd like to see somebody who has a track record with successful running backs over the course of history, is involved in a successful run game now, and I like the innovation within that Titans offense to take advantage of a scrambling quarterback. And so I'm looking at Sylvester Croom, the running backs coach from the Tennessee Titans, a guy who was head coach at Mississippi State one stretch there, first African-American coach in the, I believe it was the SEC. And he's a guy that has worked with a crap ton of super successful running backs if you look back at his lineage. I looked it up and then forgot most of them, but the list was lengthy of successful running backs. So a guy who understands the run game, understands the running back position, also has worked within the framework of having a smart, athletic quarterback. And to me, the passing offense could be even more dynamic under Russell Wilson than, say, Mariota, because Russell's just a better quarterback. I mean, sure, hands down. So that would be the guy that I would throw out there. He's been with the Titans for 5 years. So I imagine that his contract status isn't like he just signed a new one. Again, I don't know. I couldn't find it. But that's a guy who it would be a move up. So when you go to the Tennessee Titans and say, I'd like to request an interview with this guy, they're likely to grant that because most teams like to try to promote their coaches up and give them the opportunity, like Pete does, to move on and advance their careers so that you can draw in new young talent. And he's an older coach, though, too. So he's been around for quite some time. But that would be my suggestion.
I don't know all the NFL rules in terms of hiring and that sort of thing, but I do believe that if they are seeking a promotion, that the team doesn't have the same opportunity to say no as they do if it's just a lateral move.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. But that makes sense. But yeah, that's one of the guys that I looked at. There could be others. Was it Ross Bell on the Ring of Honor throughout the name Mike Shula?
When you're talking about offenses that run the ball and look for big chunk plays, I think of the Carolina Panthers, and Mike Shula just let go by the Panthers. They're also looking to hire Norv Turner, which is a name that Eric and Yakima mentioned on the Facebook page.
Well, okay, just to go back to Kroom for 1 second, the list of running backs. Sure. MJD, Steven Jackson, Amon Green, Barry Sanders, Eric Dickerson, Chris Johnson, and then obviously DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. These are guys that have all been under his tutelage. So wow, that's impressive to me. Anyways, to go back to Mike Shula. Oh, hell no. God, no. Absolutely no. All the no's. Do you want to see Russell Wilson carted off on a freaking stretcher? Because if that's what you want, then hire Mike Shula. Because his answer to the Panthers offense was run Cam Newton like a frickin' running back. and get him killed out there. That's basically his entire offense when it came to running the football. Everything was predicated off that. No, thank you.
Well, and that's where Pete Carroll has a say in how things go. He can say, dude, we're not running the ball with Russell Wilson like that.
And what other success did Mike Shula have as an offensive play caller other than that one magical season with Cam Newton when he was running him like a running back?
Sure.
None. He's not a good coach. I'm sorry. I'm totally out on Mike Shula. No, thank you.
Now, Norv Turner is another interesting name. Not so successful as a head coach, but a very successful offensive coordinator throughout his career. Left Minnesota in the middle of the season. I don't know if there were health, family issues going on, but up to that point, Minnesota was playing really well. Now, they were also hit by injuries in that season. That was 2 years ago. But Norv Turner, a big part of the Vikings' success.
So what's your opinion on? I like how you just throwed out names, but no opinions on any of them.
I have two that I'm getting to who are kind of the ones that I'm more leaning toward.
I'm asking you about Norv Turner. Are you excited about the idea of a Norv Turner offensive coordinator position?
It's one of those names that I would consider. Like, it wouldn't bother me.
I'd be more open to that than Mike Shula.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the offensive coordinators of, the 90s Cowboys teams. Had a couple good years with the Chargers when he went back there as an offensive coordinator.
So looking at Norv Turner's career, like you mentioned, offensive coordinator of the Cowboys teams, 91, 93, some Super Bowl seasons in there. Went on to be coach of the Redskins from 94 to 2000. Went back. He was the offensive coordinator of the Chargers in 2001 before getting the head coaching gig in from 2007 to 2012. Offensive coordinator for the Dolphins in 02 to 03. Offensive coordinator for the Browns in 2013. And
really?
2014, yeah, 2014. That was the year after he was let go of the Chargers, and then before he was brought on as offensive coordinator for the Vikings.
I was totally dumbstruck by the idea that he had been the Browns offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
I didn't know that at all. Well, they went 5-11 that year. Oh no, that 4-12. Yeah,
well,
so
it's still one of their better years. Have they done better since?
I don't think so. Okay, so Norv Turner, I think we're both lukewarm.
He's one of those guys. He's a veteran guy who's been around the league, and if you're looking for an established name versus an up and comer, trying to find one of those young innovator type people, then that would be a name that I would be comfortable with.
And a guy who was the leader of a LaDainian Tomlinson led offense. You know what I mean? He was the guy that spearheaded that.
Sure.
And so he knows how to make a offense revolve around a running back. I mean, I don't know about you, Brandon. I think most people would agree that the offense in Dallas during those Super Bowl years revolved way more around Emmitt Smith than it did Troy Aikman.
Absolutely.
And more so around the offensive line than either of those two guys. But that's a conversation for another day. But he understands the concept of running the ball to set up the big pass, and that he's definitely a vertical passing game guy.
Troy Aikman in his early years and throughout his career, was always a guy who could take care of the football and make big plays when you needed him to. And that's how he became a Hall of Famer, doing those things, winning Super Bowls.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you said you had two names that you were thinking at here, Brandon. Like, who you looking at? Who you got? Because that's the question, right? Who you got that's better?
One of the first guys that came to mind for me when I'm thinking of teams that run the ball, Mike McCoy, who was offensive coordinator. He was hired by Josh McDaniels in that first year. John Fox kept him on for a couple years before he was then hired away by the San Diego Chargers and became one of the youngest head coaches in the league at the time. Now, McCoy, it's been interesting because, as I mentioned, the first year hired by Josh McDaniels, then a year under John Fox and a Tim Tebow-led offense, which they ended up taking to the playoffs. Had to revamp.
Wasn't that with McDaniels?
So Tebow was drafted by
McDaniels.
And that was the 2010 season.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Orton started off the season 1-3 in 2011. So Mike McCoy was one of the guys who essentially had to revamp the offense for Tim Tebow after those first 4 games. And then the Broncos ended up going to the playoffs that year. They won the playoff game against the Steelers. And then the following year was the one where Peyton Manning came in And essentially, I don't know how much Mike McCoy had to do with that 2012 offense, but 2013 was the year that he was hired by the Chargers. Adam Gase comes in, and they end up having one of the best offenses in the history of the NFL in 2013, and that was the team that played the Seahawks.
Yeah, I wonder if there was a clause in Mike McCoy's contract with the Chargers that paid a percentage to Peyton Manning of his salary to get him that head coaching position, because that's exactly it. I look at Mike McCoy, that's a dude who held Peyton Manning's clipboard for a year or two and got paid. Congratulations, man.
He was there for 1 year under Manning, but then he came back after the stint with the Chargers.
Yeah.
And this wasn't exactly the best year with the Broncos, but in terms of a young guy who maybe hasn't quite gotten a fair shake, played under different head coaches.
He had years of Phillip Rivers. And couldn't get them anywhere near the playoffs.
As a head coach.
Yeah.
But there's
you
guys.
You can still call plays as a head coach. It's not like he took his hands off the offense and was like, nope, I'm out.
No.
He's not an innovator, man. He's just not. Like, I don't see it.
It was a name that interests me. The one guy, the dark horse that does interest me, Byron Leftwich, Arizona Cardinals quarterback coach. Young coach. Apparently had opportunities to call plays in the preseason for the Cardinals this year. And I haven't had a chance to go back and look at it, but he's one of those guys that's talked about as a potential up-and-coming coach. Bruce Arians had really solid things to say about him. Now that Arians is retired, I wonder what Byron's status is with the team now. But that could be one of those up-and-coming guys that maybe some people aren't thinking about.
That's an interesting name. So the one thing that I would like about that, one thing that would stick out to me is Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks talk about grit all the time. Byron Leftwich is the definition of grit. I remember him finishing up his career, was it at Marshall, and breaks his leg during a game and finishes out the game while between every snap, his offensive lineman would come and get underneath each of his shoulder, take him down the field. Then he would stand there and shotgun, take the snap, and complete the next pass. Dude's tough as nails. He's overcome a lot. Talk about grit. Like, that's exactly who he is. Beyond that, as far as his coaching acumen or anything along those lines, I couldn't tell you. But I'd be open to the idea, because I would much, much, much prefer somebody like that, somebody that you hadn't really heard of, somebody you hadn't thought of, especially maybe a young guy, than Mike McCoy, Norv Turner, Mike Shula, name that retread.
Yeah.
Just, I would much prefer that.
Well, here was a quote that caught my eye from Bruce Arians. This is a report from Lars Anderson in Bleacher Report magazine. Says, mark my words, Byron Leftwich will be an NFL head coach, says Arians. And apparently, and he got to know Leftwich when Arians was the offensive coordinator for the Steelers back in 2010, 2011. And Arians went on to say, Byron has just got a mind for the game. Hell, he can coach my offense better than I can coach my offense, and I designed the damn thing.
You know what? That's crazy. That is Bruce Arians heaping praise on somebody else and not himself.
Yeah, I know. It's rare. That's why it jumped out at me.
You might be onto something here. You might be onto something here. I'd like to see that interview if possible. That'd be great.
All right. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about maybe some of the...
I'm proud of you, though. I'm proud of you for digging deep on that one.
I'm digging deep at him.
I am, because the big question is always, when you fire somebody from a position, well, who you got's that's better?
I think we're getting to one thing that I think it's important for all of us fans to realize. Darrell Bevell, I know, has taken a lot of criticism. It maybe would have, in hindsight, made more sense to move on after the Super Bowl loss, as opposed to waiting a couple years down the road. But it could get worse. We could get an offensive coordinator, and it could get worse.
Absolutely. There are no guarantees that this makes things better. You wanted to talk about optimistic things later on in the pod, so I'll save my optimism for why that won't happen, why it is going to get better. There is a possibility that it gets worse. I mean, change always isn't for the better.
Well, why don't we get to those reasons for optimism? I have a couple other topics that are football related, but not Seahawks related, that I want to get to in the show today, too. Obviously, that article about the ESPN article about the Patriots came out last week. I gave my thoughts to...
catfish! Oh, God. Sorry. I just had to cough there. Oh, it's coming back. Bullshit. Catfish.
Yeah, I gave some of my thoughts to Anthony on the air last week for the Knock on Sports. Clearly, you have some thoughts. I do want to get to them, and I want to take a trip to Prisco's world this week, Adam.
Oh, wonderful. We haven't been for a while. I'm glad.
I know.
You do a good job of keeping up on Prisco news. I think you love the intro music even more than I do. And so, but I appreciate it.
Well, looking back at this season for Seattle, we talked about last week. It's quite a bit of disappointment, but I think there are some things to look at and say there were some positive takeaways. I know listening to Pete Carroll's press conference that there were several guys who he singled out as guys that he is excited about for next year. Starting off with the defense. Deion Jordan, one of those names that Coach Carroll sounded really excited about, and a guy who is going to be, they're going to be able to sign him as a restricted free agent this year. We'll see what kind of designation they put on him and how much that means that he'll get paid next year. But it definitely sounds like Deion Jordan's part of their plans moving forward. Frank Clark is a guy that he mentioned as being able to see a full season out of him because Cliff Averill going down to injury. So he was a big part of the defense. There's three guys, names that he singled out as being kind of the nucleus of the defense moving forward. And I think you picked up on this, Adam. Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, and Earl.
Yeah, the core, the guys that are right at this point in their careers, indispensable and unable to replace. Like, there's just no way that you could do that. Bobby and KJ obviously be back next year. Earl is under contract for next year. Mm-hmm. Look for him to get extended. That's just a talent that is difficult to find anywhere else as far as that sort of speed and tenaciousness. And then also to know the system as well as he does. He truly is a one-of-a-kind talent, and his play isn't falling off. There's definitely 2 to 3 more years of Earl Thomas. I really do. Like prime Earl Thomas.
Yeah.
So I would look for him to be re-signed. But you mentioned the defensive line and reasons to be optimistic. Look at the young core on the defensive line, because I do think that they're going to end up re-signing Sheldon Richardson. I think that happens.
And that was another name. It sounded like Coach Carroll was hopeful. And
yeah,
Pete Carroll saying another year in this system for Sheldon Richardson, it could be a really good thing.
Oh, absolutely. So you look at the defensive line, and there's so much young talent there between Sheldon Richardson, Nas Jones, Jaron Reed, Frank Clark. Go down the list. And let's say Knucklehead McDowell actually makes it back. You talk Deion Jordan, who had a resurrection this last year. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about that D-line. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I fully expect Michael Bennett to be back next year. I know that's not the word on the street. I know that's to the contrary and everything. For the amount of money that he makes, the type of impact that he still has, I just don't see any way he's not back next year. The defensive line has me extremely excited.
And then you move to the cornerback spot, and Shaq Griffin.
This is where I'm most excited.
Shaq Griffin, one of those guys that Pete Carroll talked about. Byron Maxwell, another guy that he talked about. But you also have Bradley McDougald, who Coach Carroll saw as an important piece on this defense, able to fill in for Earl early on in the season, able to fill in for Cam Chancellor, probably a better coverage safety than Cam Chancellor in some ways.
Well, I think you missed. I think you missed a couple names just in the defensive backfield. So you mentioned Shaq Griffin, you mentioned Byron Maxwell. Let's not forget about Justin Coleman. Let's not forget about Deshaun Shedd. And hey, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but he's pretty damn good. His name's Richard freaking Sherman. He will be back as well. You look at the litany of players that they have returning this next year in the defensive backfield, and they are loaded back there. That is such a huge upside for this team going forward.
Yeah, and I was mainly just sticking to the younger guys. I guess Maxwell, in terms of guys that are expected to leave and that potentially come back. But
he's coming back.
I hope so.
Dude, let me break this down to you why he's coming back. This is very simple. So he came to Seattle initially, right, to start out his career. It became the number 2 corner. Had a couple of big years with picks and punching the ball out and playing good coverage, and then got paid by the Philadelphia Eagles, right? And then conversely, also the Miami Dolphins, when he ended up being traded there. So kind of flames out down there, and Everybody's looking at him like he can't play. He's just sitting on the street. And like you said, oh no, he's going to be worth way too much money. We can't sign him. When the season rolled around here and Sherman went down, and I was like, no, I think we could. I think we could sign him. Go out there. Guess what? Nobody's interested. So we re-sign him. Comes back to Seattle. Plays well. Starts to rebuild his value. Sign another. If I'm Byron Maxwell, I'm going full Darrell Rivas here. I'm going to sign one more another year deal. I'm going to play well in this system that I know I thrive in, drive my market value up, and then at the end of next season, go out and strike another big deal. That's exactly what you do if you're Byron Maxwell.
But unless there's an injury, Byron Maxwell, Deshaun Chedd, going to have a hard time getting on the field because of Richard Sherman. Well, we don't know how he's going to respond to the Achilles injury coming back from that. I would suspect well. He's as much of a competitor in terms of injuries and coming back as Earl Thomas was. Pete Carroll singled out Thomas in the press conference for his ability to come back from the broken leg. A different injury for sure, but Sherman is going to approach it much in the same way that he approaches everything, and talked about a lot of that detail that Sherman went into the season, focusing on technique and how important that was for the growth of Shaq Griffin, to see Sherman focusing on his technique that much coming into the season. And that's what he was exposed to early on, and it's paid off very well for Griffin.
No, I don't see Griffin ceding playing time to Byron Maxwell, but there's no guarantee that Richard Sherman starts the season week 1, coming off of now 2 surgeries, now that he had a second cleanup procedure done on his heel ankle area, supposedly bone spurs or something of that nature. So there could be 3-4 games at the beginning of the year where Byron Maxwell is still a starter out there at the left corner. Also, there's no guarantee that there isn't another injury where he ends up filling in. Also, on top of that, how many times do you play nickel and dime coverage? All the frickin' time in the NFL now. There's places to play if you can still play. So I think Byron Maxwell would definitely get to still showcase his talents. But moving on to Griffin, you talked about his development this year and the way that he was able to learn off of Sherman and try to become more of a tactician. He's a young, bright guy. He has that attention to detail. He understands the kick step technique. He only excelled as the year went on. He is a legit number 2 in burgeoning on a number 1 corner type talent. This could be better than the original LOB, this iteration, even without Cam Chancellor. That could happen.
Ooh, you're going bold.
Look at the talent, man. Like, they're stacked from top to bottom. The only thing you need now is one more safety. Maybe that's Delano Hill. Maybe that's somebody that you bring in off the street like you did McDougald last year. But one more safety to round out that depth. And if it's not better than the LOB, they're certainly deeper.
Delano Hill's an interesting name, too, because early on, Cam Chancellor had that 1 year behind Lawyer Malloy. And there was a lot of question of, can this young guy come in and fill behind, a high impact player like Malloy? And he did very well. So we might just not know with Hill until he has a chance to get out there and play full time. And it sounded like Cam Chancellor didn't even know if he could go out there and be that leader, be that voice on defense that he ultimately ended up being. And it had to do a lot with the coaching of Carroll, coaching him up to vocalize and be that kind of leader that I think Carroll saw in him.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, it's difficult to have a great evaluation of Hill just because he didn't see the field that often. So, yeah. but just a guy that you can think about and that has the possibility of maybe contributing when it comes down the line here. Yeah, I'm excited about the defensive backfield as a whole. That is definitely one of my huge reasons for optimism. I mean, and then combine that with Bobby and KJ, combine that with all the talent on the defensive line. I think they're only going to get better. Give John Schneider one more draft class where he adds even yet another piece to that defensive line, because that's what he's going to do. It's what he does every year.
Oh, they are always adding pieces to that defensive line. And if there's anything that came out of the 2012 playoff season, it's that they were going to continue to focus on the defensive line and make sure that they weren't one player's injury away from essentially not having a pass rush.
Exactly. You mentioned the Chris Clemens injury.
Yes.
That is what you're referencing there. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism there. And then, hey, if you want to get real optimistic about it, Cliff Averill could also be back.
Cam could be back.
People are saying that it's more likely that Averill would be back than Cam.
Interesting.
We'll see. And then also, let's be even triply optimistic. I mean, we saw a Twitter post, was it, or Instagram, whatever, where Cam was talking about how when people doubt you, that basically something about God and whatever, and he was going to persevere. So he certainly hasn't given up on the idea yet. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. But that's easy to be optimistic about the defense, right, Brandon? Because they actually had another good season despite the injuries. A lot of young talent developed heading into this next offseason. But what about the offense? What are you optimistic about other than Russell Carrington Wilson on the offense?
Well, Doug Baldwin, I'm optimistic for Baldwin. Yeah. I mean, he came up 9 yards short of 1,000 yards. I think he still deserves to be in the same conversation as Steve Largent, the only other Seahawks player in history to have 3 years in a row of production that's been that consistent. Just because he's 9 yards short doesn't mean I'm going to say, oh, well, he's not. I'm curious. Was there a contract escalator if he would have gotten to 1,000 yards? Would he have gotten a bonus of some kind? If there was, I hope it's Pro Bowl and not 1,000 receiving yards.
Because if it's 1,000 receiving yards, that should be right there in a nutshell why Darrell Bevel got fired right there.
Right. Yeah.
Like that should be it. Like if you want the players to play hard for you, those things going in. Like agents have talked to you, the players talk to you, like people know where the front office has talked to you. Coaching staff should know who's in line for either records or special bonuses, things like that, and you try to butter their bread and get them those things.
And they almost got it. He almost got it in that last game. He just needed about 100-yard game in that last game. There were some big throws down the field to him. He almost had it. I still think I'm still I look at Doug Baldwin and Russell Wilson as the Craig to Largent connection of my childhood. I want these two to be together for their career.
Oh, I think they'll be together forever. For sure. I mean, these guys, I think these guys have a genuine affection for one another. I think they understand what the other is doing. I've heard some people insinuate that what Doug was trying to get at in his press conferences, saying that it wasn't Darrell Bevel's fault about the execution, that he was trying to throw Russell Wilson under the bus. I would say no. Hell no. You obviously don't understand this team. Baldwin was pointing directly at the offensive line. It's as plain as the nose on your face. If you don't understand that, then you don't get the team dynamics at all. He's not mad at Russell Wilson. Like that's ludicrous. Ludicrous. So yeah, I think you're going to see those two be a great tandem for years to come. I can see why you're optimistic about that.
One other thing with Baldwin, Cameron Cole posted his stat of the day on the Facebook page. Doug Baldwin has more career receiving touchdowns than Julio Jones, even though both became pro in 2011. Doug Baldwin with 44, Julio Jones with 43. Of the 28 wide receivers drafted that year, only A.J. Green has more receiving touchdowns, and only Green and Julio have more catches and yards. They get Doug Baldwin as an undrafted free agent. I thought that's a cool stat.
That is a cool stat. That points to some of the early major home runs that John Schneider connected on early in his GM career here in Seattle. I love the idea that nobody knows that. Nobody knows that Doug Baldwin's in that same category as those two other receivers who are also elite. And I say also elite because Doug Baldwin is freaking elite.
Yeah.
He is no longer pedestrian, nor that he was at the time he was given the moniker. But let the rest of the league continue to sleep on Doug Baldwin. That's fine.
He'll continue to break ankles and score touchdowns.
Yeah. And you want to keep angry Doug angry. Like, let the whole league continue to doubt him. Let the press continue to doubt him. Just keep it up, man. Let's keep that huge freaking chip on his shoulder. I love it.
In terms of other receivers, Tyler Lockett, definitely a guy who I expect to continue to grow in the offense. I've always taken the approach that for most receivers in the NFL, it takes them 3 years to really solidify their game and to understand the offense and just to understand how the position is played in the NFL. You talk about quarterbacks in the transition from college to the NFL. and having to get used to much tighter windows to throw the ball into. Well, receivers, they have to understand that too. They have to understand that they have to run crisp routes to be able to get open and to make that kind of opening, because look at a guy like Percy Harvin, a guy who had all the talent in the world, who was, out-talented everybody in college, and who really wasn't that great of a receiver in the NFL. Yeah, he was fast, but in terms of if he would have put the time and energy into studying tape as a guy like Doug Baldwin, and you put that body and that speed with the mind of Doug Baldwin and what he knows and how he's able to get open, that's how you make a Hall of Fame talent. And he wasn't able to do it because he just was trying to get by just based on athleticism. So it takes guys, I think, 3 years to understand that. And Tyler Lockett's in that position, especially with the injury kind of keeping him out for a little bit. And then you have a couple other guys who are coming up that it's going to take them a couple more years, but I'd expect, based on Pete Carroll's comments in the press conference, that David Moore and Amara Darboh are going to be some of those young guys that are going to be growing in these next 2 years.
Yeah, so you kind of glossed over one important point there with Lockett, was the idea that, yes, he was injured, and it took him nearly the full year just to get back to form just from the injury. Like we saw it just even in the return game late in the season, like where you could finally look at Tyler and be like, that's the Tyler Lockett that we saw early on. And so that's almost a lost season per se. So yes, I could definitely see this next year being a huge breakthrough year for him, just being confident in his body. And then also having gained the experience and having that light come on year 3, year 4, like it does for most receivers. The idea of Darboh and Moore, hooray! Not super excited about that.
I think it's going to, like I mentioned, it's going to take some time with those guys, but this team does see those guys as investments at this point.
Yeah, I don't, but that's okay. That's a place the team and I will differ. Now, I'm going to say $3 million a year question will be what happens to Paul Richardson. I feel like Paul Richardson is going to go out on the open market and absolutely get the Jermaine Kearse treatment. I think he's going to go out there, find zero market for his skills, and basically at that point, we'll have to come back to the Seahawks and sign a small deal. And with the Seahawks moving on from Jimmy Graham, which I think they will, there'll be the cap space to re-sign him, Sheldon Richardson, and get Earl Thomas under a new contract. And also, if you get Earl Thomas under a new contract, that was going to give you some salary cap relief for this next season too. So I would expect to see P. Rich back. That's my prediction on that.
So you expect P. Rich back, not Jimmy Graham.
Correct.
I'm going the other way on this because I don't think Jimmy Graham will have the kind of market that he did a few years ago when he came to 3 years ago when he came to Seattle in the trade, and he was looking for wide receiver type money versus tight end type money. I think the relationship there between Jimmy Graham and Russell Wilson is important, and maybe it could have to do with whoever they bring as offensive coordinator too, and how they would expect to use Jimmy Graham. If
you're going to go back to being a smash mouth running football team, you can't have Jimmy Graham out there.
Okay.
Unless you're going to trot him out there as legitimately a receiver and still trot out like Nick Vannett or whoever else you end up drafting to bring in kind of a more blocking sort of tight end, a more smash mouth tight end. Honestly, he's not worth the money at that point, even if he is at a lesser market value than he was when he first left New Orleans for Seattle. I don't see how you can make that investment. I understand that he was a monster in the red zone this year, but as we saw throughout the course of the season, having Jimmy Graham be your number one red zone producer wasn't healthy for the team. Look at the way that the running game struggled down in the red zone. I think there was only one rushing touchdown by a running back this year.
And that was not in the red zone. It was a 30-yard dash by McKissick in the Indianapolis Colts game, the fourth game of the season. Why don't we just play all of the rushing highlights from this entire season and play that right now?
Russell's going to hand to McKissick. He goes right side. He steps inside of a tackle. 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Seahawks. Are you kidding me?
Shot him out of the cannon.
Man, where'd he come from? He was in the backfield, and then all of a sudden he was in the end zone from 30 yards out. Goodness gracious, the Seahawks on top, 24-18.
There it is. Your one rushing highlight. J.D. McKissic, 30-yard touchdown.
Got him all knocked out there. There we go.
All the running back highlights from the season.
Yeah.
I'll go on record right now. The running game, they will run in more touchdowns with running backs next year than one. They'll improve based on this year.
All right. Well, that's a very bold prediction. But here's the thing. I think the next offensive coordinator is going to reap the benefits that Darrell Bevell has been waiting for the last 2 years in terms of the offensive line. Because as much as we rip the offensive line, let's take a look. John Schneider has invested a lot of capital into that offensive line. Justin Britt, a high-round draft pick. Ethan Posick, a high-round draft pick. Jermaine Ifedi, a high-round draft pick. Then you go and make a trade for Dwayne Brown. I don't think Jokel will be back, but that's fine. I would expect Posick to become stronger next year. That was his number one struggle by far, was just simply strength. A whole offseason in an NFL conditioning program. I'm very bullish on that. Jermaine Ifedi, the main way that he needs to improve is his temperament. We saw Ifedi actually improve going down the stretch when it came to blocking while Russell was scrambling around. He did get a little better. Look for him to improve a little bit more. I hope that they forget that George Fant was ever a part of this team, because I don't want to go backwards by bringing another guy with no experience coming off injury. I hope that doesn't happen. But then compound that with maybe one good free agent signing, one good draft pick, and boom, you're right back in the mix.
I don't see why you're so down on George Fant. George Fant can be...
Why are you so optimistic?
George Fant can be just fine as a backup left tackle behind Dwayne Brown. He can be fine as the backup.
I'm sorry, I'm done with developmental prospects on the offensive line. Give me dudes that can play now. Like, we've gone through those growing pains the last 2 years. Like, I don't need to grow with George Fant anymore. The Vikings went out and drafted a center that played day one.
He'd be just fine as a backup left tackle.
Well, as a backup, fine. But as a down in, down out player, I don't need
We've
him.
seen much worse backup left tackles on this team. So don't kick him off the team.
Well, that's fine. He just doesn't need to start for me. That's
okay.
What I'm trying to tell you. I do not want to see him on a regular freaking basis. I do not see him as the answer at right guard next year or left guard. Like, no thanks. We really need to improve at the guard position. I think that can be done just with the natural progression of Posick, and then one good, sneaky good free agent signing, one good draft pick, and you're right there. So I am optimistic, and I think the next offensive coordinator is going to get to reap the rewards of all of the draft capital and draft capital in the form of the trade for Dwayne Brown as well, put into this offensive line over the last 2 years. I know this sounds like some dude has been pining after the same chick for like 9 years, and she shot him down 7 times. He's like, next time it's going to be different. But I think next year it's going to be different. And then at that point, name that running back. Running back X will have a good year, because we don't need help at running back. Plug in any dude at running back. Any dude at running back behind good blocking. Alex Collins. Like, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Any team with a good offensive line can just run the ball with any dude. It doesn't matter. So this idea that we're going to go out and sign some big name running back, oh, give me a break.
No.
You remember how that went last year?
Yeah, I don't see a Le'Veon Bell signing in the offseason. I don't see drafting a running back with the first pick in the first round. I think Pete Carroll, based on his comments in the press conference, he's really excited about Chris Carson coming back. He mentioned CJ Prosise as a guy coming back. J.D. McKissic. 2 names that he didn't mention were Eddie Lacy and Thomas Rawls. He's a restricted free agent this offseason, so maybe the expectation is you aren't going to put a tender amount on him and that you would need to re-sign him. Yeah, Thomas Rawls is coming back.
Probably not. And then some of the other names that you rattled off, I know everybody's all amped up about Chris Carson, but remember when everybody was all amped up about Thomas Rawls coming back from the same exact sort of leg injury and never regained his form? Like, I'm going to need to see it again out of Chris Carson. And I only saw it for, 3 games?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that he's absolutely the answer. And then there's the idea, too, they could bring back Mike Davis, who showed some flashes. He did okay.
Yeah, Mike Davis was the other name Carroll mentioned. And then he did say additional competition at that spot. But I don't think that means that they're drafting a guy in the first round.
No, they won't draft in the first round at all. They'll trade out of that. Remember, they don't have a second and third round pick because of the Dwayne Brown trade.
I'm not so sure that they're going to trade out of that, but I think those are conversations as we get close to the draft. I want to talk to Rob Staten some more. I want to get an idea for the talent that's going to be available at that spot before I expect them. I know it's happened in the past, but I don't necessarily know if I want to say that I expect them to trade out of it at this point.
I expect it more than I don't. Let's put it that way.
All right, Adam. Well, I think that covers all the positions. I think we can always be optimistic with Russell Wilson as quarterback, so I don't think we need to discuss that in any level of detail. But before we go to the break, we have to take a trip to Prisco's world.
La 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 la, la 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 la, Prisco's world. La 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 la, la 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 la, Prisco's world. Prisco has his hot takes and nothing more. That's Prisco's world.
And as the song goes, Prisco loves his hot takes and nothing more. He's got a doozy of a hot take this week. And
does he now? Okay.
Oh yeah. We've talked about Pete Prisco in terms of his criticism of our quarterback, Russell Wilson. And if you've never heard the name Pete Prisco, maybe you're just tuning into the show. Prisco's an analyst for CBS Sports. And he's gone after Wilson in the past about not being the type of pocket passing quarterback that he appears to fawn over in terms of everybody else. He doesn't have an appreciation for Russell Wilson's game. In fact, it wasn't until the end of the season when he started thinking about Wilson being a legitimate MVP candidate that everything went south for Wilson. So I think
he reverse jinxed him.
That's
what he
catfish.
I know. And he was again this week, too. And apparently he's not above going after college quarterbacks in some strange ways, because Monday night was the college football championship. Pete Prisco, after Alabama came back, won the game in overtime with a touchdown pass from a quarterback that they swapped out at halftime. Jalen Hurts was a guy who started the game at quarterback for Alabama, benched at halftime. His replacement comes in, throws the game-winning touchdown, and they interviewed the starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts, at the end of the game. And, young kid, just happy, the ticker tape coming down and just taking it all in, smiling, enjoying the national championship, the national title that Alabama had just won. Pete Prisco tweets out, "Jalen smiling. Dude, you were benched. I wouldn't be smiling." To criticize a college quarterback for not being excited about his team winning a national title. Yeah, he was benched, but his team just won. And he was excited about the fact that it is a team accomplishment and they just won. Come on, Prisco. This is why we have Prisco's world.
Wow. That tells you everything you need to know about Pete Prisco right there. It's all about him. Like, he loves Pete some Pete. Like, there is no doubt about that. And if he can't look at a young kid enjoying the moment, being a team player on top of all that, he can't take pride in the fact that he was a starting quarterback pretty much the entire year and got them within one half of football of winning the national championship. And then his backup, who he only talked about in the most glowing of terms, obviously a kid that he likes, a friend of his, went out and had success and won the game for him, and the rest of his teammates / friends seemed to enjoy that. Unreal. Unbelievable. How could a guy enjoy that moment?
How could it possibly happen? Wow. Only in Prisco's world.
He is a piece of work, man. He is a piece of work. But look, and I think Hurts has to understand too, like, that's probably going to be the peak of his college career right there. I mean, because he's not an NFL quarterback. He's not moving on to the next level.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you enjoy that moment as much as you can.
Hey, and he might have 2 more championships the way Saban seems to be going, and he's just a sophomore. So he could be backing up Tua next year for the next couple of years.
I don't know much about college ball, but I did watch the last, a few minutes in overtime of that game, and I saw Hurts' reaction, and I thought not only was it heartfelt, but classy. And 2 things that Pete Prisco could obviously not understand.
That's what normal people think. That's what everybody else who watched that thought that right. Wow, what a classy move by a young kid to be so excited and happy for the backup that came in and replaced him. That's what we all thought. But no,
right.
No, not maybe not all of us, apparently.
Right.
Let's hit the break, Adam. Let's come back. I want to get a few more thoughts from you on this Patriots article. We have a couple new members of the flock, and of course, we have some do better and better at life.
All right, let's get to it, man.
And we are back from the break. The Seahawkers Booster Club is the official booster club of the Seattle Seahawks. Check out Seahawkers.org to find a chapter near you. Taking a look at Twitter through the break and some speculation on some other potential offensive coordinator candidates. Steve Sarkisian, which apparently Dan Quinn already shot down.
Yeah.
Of course, Sarkisian was coordinator for Pete Carroll at USC and then was the OC for the Falcons this year. Another name, Todd Haley, which I don't know if is his contract up with Pittsburgh potentially.
I don't know, but I know that his hip's in like 15 pieces. He got in a bar fight.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, that's never stopped us from hiring coaches. At least his fight sounded a little bit more respectable than the one Tom Cable got into when he was with the Raiders. So Joe Lombardi, another name. Joe Lombardi, I think, is the quarterback coach for the Saints. He has some offensive coordinator experience. His brother Vince actually lives in Seattle. Yes, they are part of the Vince Lombardi lineage of the former Packers head coach.
So that impresses me less. What impresses me more is the idea of somebody who's been around Sean Payton for a couple seasons.
Sure.
And you saw the Saints turn to an explosive running team this year. And so that's a guy that has some experience in that sort of thing. And running an offense with a shorter quarterback in Drew Brees. So that's interesting. I kind of like the idea of that name.
Where he's been before that, his stint in the NFL as offensive coordinator was with the Lions in 2014-2015. And I look at that and I go, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also look at that and understand that they haven't had a running back or a running game there for 96 years.
So it fits.
And Matt Stafford isn't great. And it's the Lions.
So this job with the Saints, he was actually holding the quarterback's coach job from 2009 to 2013 as well. So
some things to think about right there. No doubt about it. But we'll keep an eye on it for you guys. If you guys have suggestions, go ahead and email the show and let us know.
Yeah, go Hawks at SeahawkersPodcast.com, on Twitter at SeahawkersPod, Facebook.com/SeahawkersPodcast. Send in your thoughts because, well, things could move quickly. We may know by the next show, but clearly some big changes coming in the Seahawks coaching staff this offseason.
You know, this offseason for doing the podcast might be a little more entertaining than seasons previous. We may have more to talk about. More upheaval, more turmoil, more new pieces. It could be helpful for our deal, you know. So maybe in a way, that's one of the things I'm excited about for the next season.
Well, as we move on, I want to give a big thanks to the Midwest Seahawkers chapter, to the Las Vegas Seahawkers and Outlaw Flags for their donations. The Midwest Seahawkers chapter donated $400 towards shipping some gloves, hand warmers, snacks, and those kind of things overseas to Georgia Deployment Program Resolute Support Mission Rotation 7. That's a mouthful. I'm glad they abbreviate that.
Yeah, what in the world is that?
They're deploying in support of I think it's to train Afghan troops.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, it's a very descriptive title. I knew exactly what that was all about just by the title. But good for them. Hand warmers and snacks. Like that's a nice gesture.
Hey, those are important.
If somebody
things.
sent me hand warmers and snacks, I would be really excited.
Especially in areas like Afghanistan in the wintertime. It can get pretty cold.
Yeah.
And Las Vegas Seahawkers, I know they were sending a care package. Outlaw Flags, sending some Seahawks flags because I think about 75% of that group is from the Pacific Northwest. So just a big thanks to them, and wanted to give them a shout out on the show.
Absolutely. Nope. Nice work, guys.
Well, moving on to some other NFL topics. Maybe you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this New England ESPN article because...
Nope, not really. Yeah.
There's some things that I really wanted to believe out of the article, like Tom Brady throwing a big hissy fit for not getting Patriot of the Week. But those types of things just don't hold up to the, what I consider to be actual reality of Tom Brady, especially being over 40 years old, like he would have any care in the world, as if he got Patriot of the Week.
Look, all I know is this, is that Seth Wickersham is employed by ESPN. He might as well be employed by whatever the football equivalent is of the National Enquirer. Like, that's exactly who this guy is as a reporter. Again, this is a little, this is why I'm dubious of that new book that just came out about Trump, too. A lot of unsourced, just kind of rumors, accusations, things like that, and whether or not you feel like it's true or not is one thing, but that you want it to be true. Like, I know there's a few of you out there who are gigantic Patriot haters. Dave Blomquist. And I'm sure you really, really wanted this story to be true. But the thing is, you know how much stock he can put into the whole thing? Absolutely freaking zero. I mean, if you apply the same standard that we applied to the way that he wrote about the Seahawks, which turned out, in our case, we turned out to be correct about the things that were in that article that weren't true. If you apply that same standard to look at this one about the Patriots, you're going to find that none of it's correct. He is just a gossip columnist. Seth Wickersham, not a journalist, in my opinion.
There are a few things that are true in that article. The Patriots did trade away Jimmy Garoppolo for a second-round pick. Tom Brady did have an explosion on the sidelines that everybody saw. And Bill Belichick fired Tom Brady's trainer from, said that he can't come in the building anymore.
Banned him from the facility.
Banned him from the building, yeah.
Yeah.
Those things happened.
Yeah, I could have written that article. Yeah, that's common knowledge. You know what? I could have written the whole article. I'll do a takedown of the Pittsburgh Steelers next, and it's going to go something like Le'Veon Bell is sleeping with Ben Roethlisberger's wife. Mike Tomlin doesn't show up to work 3 days a week. The Rooneys are actually part of the Illuminati, and Antonio Brown is a lizard person. Like, I could write that it'd have the same amount of credibility as Seth Wickersham and the garbage he pulls out of his butt. Like, I'm just over the guy. This is why I didn't want to spend much time on it. Guy's a tabloid journalist. There's just zero respect, man.
So much speculation and feeling and maybes throughout the article. There are so many. I put down a couple lines that I read that were clearly just him speculating based on his feeling after interviewing people. Those interviewed describe a lingering sadness around the team, as if coaches and staff know that it might be the end of the year. Many Patriots and staff believe Brady is a good man who has a hard time saying no to Guerrero, his trainer. They've noticed that he seems to be searching this year, as if reaching the pinnacle of his profession is as fleeting as it is rewarding, manifesting itself in outbursts like the one at McDaniels. Belichick seems to be grinding harder than ever, as if more than a sixth championship is at stake.
Really? He's out at the club grinding on people harder? He's grinding harder than ever? Look, I know what
he's a talented writer. You have to admit, reading something like that.
He's a talented BS artist, dude. Like, that is some flower. Look, I've often had a thing for writers. A couple gals who've been writers. And I've never been so strung along ever in my life than by Writer Chick. They can put together garbage like that sounds real flowery and nice, and you start to buy in for half a second. But if you really peel it back to what it actually means, it means jack and catfish. Just like every single one of this guy's article. He's a garbage journalist, man.
Well, moving on. In our Seahawkers podcast Pick'em League, for our members of the flock, only 2 people getting all 4 games right. Jimmy Groan and I Love You Flockers. So we might have to give away a prize this week because only 2 people. That's pretty impressive. I think I have a few extra boxes of Baldwin Smacks that I could send out.
Yeah, you should do that because I went 1-3 last week in the playoffs.
It was an interesting round considering how the Titans came back, considering how the Falcons were able to win on the road. That was maybe more expected. But then the Jaguars get the win and the Saints pull through. Suck it, Cam.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the one. That was the one I got. I picked Bills. That was a heart pick. Obviously, I picked Chiefs. I didn't think that a team could go into Arrowhead and win in the first round. But I also should have realized that Alex Smith folds in the second half of playoff games consistently,
and especially when he doesn't have his star tight end too.
whatever. I mean, that's how many different opportunities does a guy like that get to not come through? That's like the 90th time. And then the Falcons over the Rams. I don't know why I picked the Rams.
I picked them as a reverse jinx.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and it worked out well.
So it was just a bad week for me. So to those two folks with the perfect week, congratulations. I have a hard time picking the playoffs here on out because I honestly just don't care. My dad asked me, like, I've got a job coming up here in February. He's like, oh, wait, what weekend's the Super Bowl? And I honestly replied, I could care less.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be in the air during the Super Bowl. So,
are you planning like a base jump, or like are you going to do a flying squirrel suit thing? Like, what are you doing?
My wife and I are taking a trip. So,
oh, okay. Oh,
and it
so
just
you'll be
happened
flying.
to turn out that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be in the air flying.
I didn't know if you were going to be like jumping on a trampoline. I didn't know what you meant by in the air. I was very confused.
I'm just going to do a jump off my porch and kick both my feet in the air at some point during the Super Bowl, just so I'll be in the air.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Running down the leaderboard, PBRU Sirius holding on to the top spot, 2350. C-Monk 12, 2330. Harvin the Time of My Life, 2310. Hawks Dozen, 2290. And rounding out the top five, the Blue and Green Mile, 2280.
Well played, guys. Better than me this year. I don't know what to say. I'm honestly checked out of the Pick'em League now. I'm so checked out of the rest of the NFL. It's not even funny.
Yeah, well, I got 10 points on you this last week because I had 2 picks right. So,
well, hooray!
I don't know if you're getting to the point where there's not enough games to come back now.
Literally, I was done with this when the Hawks were done. Like I don't have a care to spare about the rest of the league.
Well, fortunately, we have some members of the flock, some new members of the flock that have some cares to spare that want weekly podcasts, Adam.
Yes. Well, I will definitely commit to more weekly podcasts then, because you guys have committed to us, and this is cool. So after being skunked for 2 weeks in a row, we now have new members of the flock 2 weeks in a row since. You guys are awesome.
So welcome to the flock to James Steele, who's in with a 512 pledge. And a welcome to the flock to Steve Eichenhout, in for $3.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, guys. Appreciate that. So patches for Mr. Steele, and then Mr. Eichenhout in for the Patreon Pick'em League then, and bonus shows. So thank you so much to you guys. We appreciate your support. Definitely helps keep us going here through the off season when I want to just check out. But you guys don't let me.
No, and another group not letting you because they've given us raises. Joshua Wilson up to 1212 for his
Holy
pledge.
Smokes.
Becca Christensen up to her pledge to 1212, and Dave Bloomquist up to 1212 as well. So a lot of people getting into that 1212 group, which could open up spots.
Could open up a few spots then for folks that want to get into the Seahawkers Podcast Ring of Honor on Facebook. The amazing community of amazing 12s that is more fun than a person should be allowed to have on Facebook. So some of those guys, like you said, get up into 1212. Thanks for that very much. And, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, but there's some openings if you want to get in, if you want to be one of the cool kids.
One of those cool kids, Mike Mason, took that spot going from 5 to 6, says, hey guys, once again, the podcast is brightening up a somewhat boring day at the office. Since you guys do an awesome job, and I was super impressed with the stickers and patch I received last week, I'm upping my pledge. I'd also like to out myself as one of the 2 Windows Phone users that you mentioned at the end of the podcast. Needless to say, I'd already upped my pledge before I heard your disparaging remarks. Windows phones are special, made for special people. At least that's what my mom tells me. Keep up the good work, and go Hawks, from Mike.
Mike, you're a very special man with a special phone with a special mom. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you, bud. It does. It takes a special person to use something that nobody else uses. He's breaking the mold is what Mike's really doing. I've just been looking at this all wrong.
I know we had another member of our Facebook Ring of Honor group post that he just likes having the logo from the Windows Phone app just on his home screen. So it doubles. It works that way too.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty cool. See, there's benefits to the Windows Phone I would never know. All I know is if it's a small phone, when this one dies, that might be where I go. I might go to a Windows Phone. Whatever my phone buying experience goes like this. Phone breaks, go to the store, and I look at them and I say, what is the smallest phone I can physically buy? So it fits in my pocket, like a phone.
Dave Bloomquist also sent along a note with his raise, says, in from the start. and with you to the end. Happy Rays Day. Go Hawks.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, he is as dedicated to the show as anybody, man. One of the OGs. Appreciate it.
Another one of the OGs, John Davison, says, "Hi, fellas. Wanted to wait a while before I committed to commenting on the season, mainly because I was gutted. We didn't make the playoffs, and I had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't as bad as the 90s. I began to think about where it all went wrong when it finally comes to me. I thought about a long list: coaching, kicking, penalties, running game, O-line, guards, injuries. Yes, they were all contenders. So which one was it? Answer, none of the above. It was the home form and the fact that the Clink is not a fortress anymore. And when did this all start? The moment after all these years I finally made it to Seattle for the Redskins game. Sorry, people, it was down to me. I don't know if I dare to come back again. I did see them win in D.C. 3 years ago when Harvin had 3 touchdowns disallowed, so it's just a home thing. Now, on Thursday, they are announcing the games for next year in England, and there's a strong rumor one of the games might feature the Hawks. So if it's true, then will I be allowed to go? This is clearly a problem. Do better." From John. Go Hawks.
Well, John, the answer's simple here, my friend. Yes, you are allowed to go, and it's not a home game. So you can still go.
And you can still come back to Seattle. You just can't bring Barry.
See, that's exactly right. This isn't a John problem. This is a Barry the Redskin problem. We can blame the home woes on Barry. In fact, I do. Every night when I'm going to sleep and close my eyes, I curse Barry the Redskin for killing our home field advantage. No, I think what really killed our home field advantage was the fact that we decided not to play offense for a half each and every game.
It does help the other team. When you go back to the Colts game, they didn't start that game well. The Colts were leading at halftime to the Colts.
Yeah. I think you heard Pete Carroll also iterate this in his press conference, the idea that just preaching the finish instead of how you start as well is a mistake. So instead of saying, like, can you win the game in the first, second, third, or can you win the game in the fourth quarter like he used to, I think he needs to say, can you win the game with an accumulation of effort over all the quarters? And I think that's how you do it.
Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, though.
No? Okay.
Well, he did mention that. He also talked about penalties. They need a renewed focus on penalties.
Right, because one of the things he acknowledged is that the margin for error is lesser.
Yes.
With these teams. Because, look, I mean, as good as the defense is, as optimistic as I am for the defense, you generally only get 1 or 2 years of that peak historic level type defense, and then you have a very good defense for a number of years that comes after that. If you don't have that historical type defense, then you can't overcome those penalties nearly as well. Or at least one aspect of your football that is historically great. So if you're just going to be very good in a bunch of areas, which when I say just be very good, it's hilarious to think about our standard right now. But if you're very good, overall as a football team, your margin of error is still lesser. And so you can't commit those boneheaded penalties, and especially as timely as many of them were. That was the bigger problem. So we'll see. We'll see if there's a correction of that. We'll see if there's a renewed emphasis on playing all the quarters and go forward from there.
It's interesting that a 9-7 finish would lead to so many changes on the team, but you did mention margins of error. And, clearly, whether it's penalties, whether it's slow starts on offense, whether it's the kicking game, those margins, you had enough to where you may have been able to overcome it and get in the playoffs with just one of those things going the right way. But with all of them this offseason and now with all the changes, it's questionable to me, just as of right now, seeing all these changes happen, if next year is going to be a type of year where you're right back in it, or if maybe there is a little bit of transition as another group tries to gel together. And that's going to be something that's going to be a big part of this offseason now that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, that'll be one story. The majority of things that we're going to have to do in the offseason is talk about how Richard Sherman's not getting traded, how Earl Thomas is not getting traded, because those stories are already out there. I've been seeing them the whole time. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, no, I expect them to be right back in this because the main leaders of this team are still there, whether that's Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson or Earl Thomas. I'm not worried about having to take a season or two to. This isn't rebuild. This is reload.
Well, on to some do better and better at life.
All right, man. Who you got for do better?
My do better this week is for Browns players, the Cleveland Browns, and not all of them, just a couple in particular. The Cleveland Browns, a fan of the Cleveland Browns, decided that many weeks ago that if the Browns were going to go 0-16, he was going to hold a parade for an 0-16 season. So Chris McNeil, the organizer of the parade, he followed through on his word. Some people donated to help make it happen. I guess he got some corporate contribution too. They tried to make some good out of it as well. They filled at least 4 vans full of food to donate to the Cleveland Food Bank, along with almost $15,000 of money that they raised. Apparently Farmers Only, a dating website, had like an $8,000 donation for it as well. So there were some good things in addition to some of the photos that were kind of crazy from the event that came out of it. But you had a couple players, mainly Emmanuel Ogbah, who said, that parade is a joke. Don't call yourself a true Browns fan if you go to that thing. Going 0-16 was embarrassing enough as a player. That's like adding fuel to a fire, and it is completely wrong. And then you had Danny Shelton saying that parading around isn't encouraging a change. It's more so encouraging players to avoid the opportunity to play here. 1-31 isn't what we want to be known for, but we won't stop fighting to win here. For players to take this approach, to go after fans, you guys are the ones that are putting this on the field. You're the ones that win 0-16. This isn't the fans' fault. The fans' fault are trying to make some good out of it, whether it's having a parade to show that they actually care to ownership, that going 0-16 it's for a fan base to have to go through that. It's not acceptable. So for the Browns players to making this out, to go after the fans when they were the ones that directly contributed to going 0-16, do better.
I don't know, the first player that you had mentioned there that said that this parade is a joke, that's exactly freaking right. Thanks for calling a spade a spade. It is a joke. That's the entire point. It's a joke. We went 0-16. Hooray. It's called sarcasm. Okay. I'm sorry that you don't understand. That's a comment by a humorless individual that doesn't understand it. Look, man, how much misery has Cleveland Brown fan been through for, say, I don't know, since Jim Brown and Otto Graham played? Like, all the misery. Like, that's all they've had. So you're going to take it out on them when they try to at least have some sort of fun and not feel down in the dumps over your craptastic dumpster fire of yet another season, and you're going to blame them? What a joke, man. That's the joke. That's right. The joke.
That they are somehow taking this seriously as it's some kind of condemnation of them as players. Like, don't take it so personally.
Yeah, man. That's ridiculous.
Who you got this week?
My do better this week is for the mother catfish Rams and their owner, Stan Kroenke. Stan Kroenke is a piece of catfish as an NFL owner. And if you don't know why, it's because he took a loyal fan base like the St. Louis fan base that was there, stabbed them directly in the back to run to LA for big money. And then comes out after their loss here to the Atlanta Falcons and has the audacity to say the following: in 2 years, we'll be in a new stadium, and I think we can have a true home field advantage like a lot of the other teams do. We don't really have that now. End quote. Talking about how the LA Coliseum isn't much of a home field advantage. You want to know why you don't have a home field advantage? Has nothing to do with your stadium. But he seems to think so. He goes on. He goes, first he says, well, maybe I shouldn't say that because the fans were great. No, they weren't. There weren't any there because there aren't any fans in freaking LA. But that's fine. That's a whole nother argument there. But then he goes on to talk about the Minnesota Vikings in their new stadium. He tries to compare the Coliseum, which seats like 94,000 people, to the Viking Stadium, which hosts like 67,000 fans. And he goes, have you been up there? That is a true home field advantage because it's so loud. It's packed. It's new. Here, newsflash, Stan. It's not because it's a new stadium that gives them a home field advantage. They had a home field advantage when they were playing at the Golden Gophers freaking stadium. All the years, or the 2 years prior to them moving into their new stadium. They had a home field advantage in their old dome that had a roof that collapsed under the freaking snow. Still a home field advantage. They had a home field advantage because they didn't stab their fans in the back, take them to a fair weather city with a fair weather fan base, and then wonder why you have no fans and no home field advantage. Stan Kroenke, you have no idea what makes a fan, what makes home field advantage. You are an insulated 1%er that doesn't know crap about crap. Do better.
Wow. I did not see those comments, but clearly
he's out of touch.
I mean, clearly people, Green Bay Packers fans, since their stadium is so old, they can't have a home field advantage at Lambeau.
No.
They need a new stadium.
Yeah. He stabs his loyal fans in the back, takes the team to another town that's never been loyal to the NFL in any way, shape, or form, and takes him to a town where he's going to compete with another NFL franchise for that same pool of fans, and then wonders why he doesn't have a home field advantage. Must be the stadium. That's clearly it. And the extra couple $2 billion I get for having the taxpayers fund the building of my new stadium. It's got to be the stadium, right?
It's got to be the stadium.
What an idiot.
It's got to be.
God, Seattle fans, be so thankful. Be so thankful for your owner and Paul Allen that he is not a jerk-off like Stan Kroenke.
I'm thankful.
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to the Around the NFL guys talk about how great the crowd was for that playoff game. I think they were the only ones that I heard talk about how great the crowd was at that playoff game.
They were good?
I don't know. When I saw the game, it didn't seem particularly.
They must have had a high payroll from
amazing.
that game to hire all those actors if it was a good crowd at the stadium. Because we all know it wouldn't be actual organic Rams fans. I mean, you know that there was a casting call that was put out again.
Of course. You got to run the casting call before every game.
Todd Gurley was knocking on doors. Please
come to the game.
Please,
we're in the playoffs now.
Knocking on doors. Yeah, like a political candidate.
Hi, I'm Todd Gurley. Did you know that Los Angeles has an NFL team? Did you know that I had the most yards from scrimmage of any other player in the NFL? I'd like to invite you down to watch our playoff game this weekend against the Atlanta Falcons.
I'd appreciate your fandom. I'd appreciate your cheers. And just, please, if you could give just a moment of your time to support your new local team.
Just come to the game. Please come to the game.
Please. Maybe Stan Kroenke needs to get out there and beg. He's got the Field of Dreams.
He can pay the actors. I know that much.
He's got the Field of Dreams approach to gaining fans. If you build it, they will come. Like, that's basically his mantra.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Not if you stay there and invest in a fan base that they will come. Not that.
Well, on to Better at Life.
All right, man.
My Better at Life this week is for Marcus Mariota, quarterback of the Titans, because Adam, he did something that we've been talking about all season long. We've wanted Russell Wilson to draw up a play where he throws a touchdown pass to himself. Well, Marcus Mariota, he did it. He did it, and he did it in a playoff game, and he did it to help contribute to the Titans' win over the Chiefs. Now, he didn't do it as conventionally as we would have liked to see it drawn up, where a quarterback just drops back, lobs it up in the air, and runs a route and catches it himself. But he actually, he threw it into the line, and he had the wherewithal, as the pass was being batted back to him, to catch the ball and to run it into the end zone. I know there are questions about whether or not he let go of the ball while his entire body was over the line of scrimmage, and maybe it should have been a flag. I know there were a lot of questionable calls in that game, but to see it go down and to see a quarterback catch a touchdown pass from himself, Marcus Mariota, better at life than Skip Bayless.
And one of his feet was clearly behind the line. You just have to have some portion of your body behind the line of scrimmage.
It was close.
But he clearly had at least one portion of his body behind the line of scrimmage. Marcus Mariota is number 8, right?
Yeah.
Well, apparently you have to wear the number 8 to pull this off, because the only other guy I can think of who's pulled this off is Steve Young.
Steve Young, he actually got it in for a touchdown too, huh?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's the only other guy in the history of the NFL. So,
well,
if you're
3 is kind of, we just need to take a Sharpie and draw a line down Russell Wilson's jersey to fill out the 8.
Look, if you want, you know what the new offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks needs to do? He needs to come in and tell Russell Wilson he needs to change his number to 8 and just start throwing touchdown passes to himself. That's the innovation we're looking for.
That's one thing to look forward to in the 2018 season.
Absolutely. But that was kind of a fun play.
It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right, man. My better at life than Skip Bayless this week is for the U.S. military because they're doing some fun stuff. You know what kind of fun stuff, Brandon? Bat drones with lasers. That's right. Bat drones with freaking lasers. This sounds amazing to me. The Defense Department just put out a grant that helps to try to bring universities and people in the defense industry together to come up with new and novel solutions to different problems. And one of the things that they're doing with this $6 million grant is to study biological organisms such as bats and flying insects to find different ways to improve complex flight for drones. So you don't just have like, a flying model airplane going around, right? Like I used to fly when I was a kid. No. You get to have a remote control flying bat powered by lasers. And to me, this is freaking cool. They're gonna shoot lasers at these things to power them up like instantaneously as they're out flying around all bat-like doing bat drone things. And I just ordinarily this would terrify me, like just the idea that this power could be used by the U.S. military. But they look freaking cool,
like the robot cheetah. That thing was frightening.
That is frightening. Yeah. Well, this is a way you could chase a robot cheetah. You'd have a robot bat to chase the robot cheetah around and surveil it. But anyways, for using bats and lasers and putting it together to make little mini drones, U.S. military, you're better at life than Skip Bayless.
I think I saw some, maybe it was military, but it was hummingbird drones.
Yeah, same concept, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that would have made this better, Brandon, is if they were making hoverboards powered by lasers.
We need the hoverboards. Come on, military. Make it happen. Right.
I'm going to keep advocating for that for you. I know how much you need this.
I do need it. We haven't had enough hoverboard talk on the show, but maybe now that it's the off season, the off season, we need to get back into some hoverboard talk.
Yeah. And here's the thing. You can tell just by my better at life that it is the off season because that's the best I could come up with.
Don't just put this on it being the off season. You've done this all season.
I've been mailing it in all season. Is that what you're trying to say?
Not mailing it in. I mean, you have your sciencey better at lives.
Oh yeah, this one wasn't that great. Other than I just thought it was cool.
I'm glad we closed the show with it because why not?
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, exactly. Because it's not about how you finish, Brandon. It's how you start. And I think we started really well on this podcast. So with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.